Hey, this is The Rest with Joel Kovacs, episode 14. The rest of my thoughts, the rest of our church, and hopefully a little rest for our souls. Thank you for listening. Disclaimer, this is not a sermon for you sermonators out there. These are my thoughts and interests, and these are your thoughts and interests. The rest is a time for open and safe opinions and dialogue. And welcome everybody to The Rest. This is part 2 of a little miniature series that we're doing this month, the month of May, because May is Mental Health Month. And if you're picking up on this episode 14, then you probably listened to episode 13, where Katie Kovacs, my wife, she spent the majority of the time in that podcast telling her story as it relates to her journey with mental health and an eating disorder. And if you are just plugging in here and you didn't hear that, then you really should go back and listen to that before you jump into this, because what we're going to do is pick right up where we left off. And the brief summary is that Katie grew up in a great home. First of all, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah? Ready for round 2 here?
Ready for round 2.
Ready for round 2. Grew up in a great home, and of course, every home has its challenges. And then was faced with some challenges throughout her family and throughout her personal life. And then ended up, from that environment, ended up in a very rigorous, what we would call a toxic, unhealthy, kind of Bible church environment. And that pushed Katie over the brink. Again, I'm summarizing. Please go back and listen to episode 13. And that environment kind of revealed in her, revealed is not the right way to put that. How would you say that? It.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Well, the environment brought about the eating disorder, or it.
I mean, any toxic environment is going to create symptoms in someone. Right.
So that environment kind of brought about the eating disorder, and then so kind of like that was like it's quite a story. You know, Katie really shared her heart, and it was so great. And so Katie, what I want you to do in this session, we heard your story, is now I kind of want you to unpack for us what you've learned. You know, I want you to teach us what you've learned about mental health, all different facets of it, and then just kind of take us on a journey of that, and then into what you do now and how mental health overlaps with the church. So, as you left Word of Life, and then you started to go into therapy, what were the factors? Like, what was it that helped you actually start to heal?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, any therapist, any counselor will tell you that the number one healing factor of therapy is the relationship. So that by far, I mean, you heard the way I talked about Dr. Hill, what she offered me in terms of safety and security. That is really how we heal, is in relationship. And actually, you know, this is not going to come as a shocker to anyone in the 514 community. We talk about the importance of being in relationship, being in community, and that's what therapy was for me. I say that, but also say, yes, it is very important for a therapist to be skilled at what they do. And she was highly skilled.
It's not just, if you're with a therapist, that alone, there's a certain type of therapy, a skill.
Yes, yeah. And I also would like to honor, you know, just so people know, Dr. Hill was one of the best in the world for what I was dealing with, and happened to be 20 minutes or less from my house. And so I had privilege to be able to access that resource, and just so happened to have one of the best in my backyard. She's still considered one of the most revered clinicians in the eating disorder world, which is pretty amazing.
That you ended up with her.
Yes.
Was that by chance?
I mean,
basically.
I guess.
Basically.
Yeah. It was, the backstory of her is that OSU tried to get rid of their eating disorders clinic, and she was like, nope, not okay.
And she did her
and got really angry and said, I will single-handedly keep it alive, because it wasn't on their agenda. And so created that at Harding Hospital, and that became its own entity. So it's pretty cool. So when I say, you know, the relationship is the most healing factor. Obviously, a therapist needs skill. I think for me, other factors that played a role in that healing is when you think of anorexia, it was objectifying twofold. One is just the objectification of the body and how does it look? What is the appearance? What's beautiful? That kind of objectification. But then I was also healing from the objectification of this Bible college where we call it becoming a self-object. What it means is that you believe that your sole purpose is to meet the needs of other people around you and sacrifice your own. So you can imagine how I arrived there when we hear these constant messages of service and sacrifice, that the Christian life, the major tenet is about service and sacrifice, and that's your purpose. I essentially took that to an extreme of becoming a self-object where my needs did not matter, my emotions didn't matter, my life didn't matter. It was all about elevating other people. And so really the healing factor of my time in therapy was to get rid of that twofold objectification, to learn that my body wasn't just something to be evaluated, that I could nourish it and take care of it, and that it wasn't just about how it looked, but then also to learn that my value in this world is not simply to just exist to meet the needs of other people, not even just, from a Christian point of view, but that it was okay to have my own sense of value, my own needs, my own life, my, again, agency, right? And even beyond that, my own beliefs, my own convictions, my own relationship with God, own opinions, emotions, everything. And so that's
therapy,
really,
therapy helps you piece all that together.
Yeah.
What specifically, when you talk about the twofold, what was it? Twofold objectification.
I mean, that's an oversimplified. Of course, there were other parts to that.
Right. I guess part of what I'm, wanting to understand is like what a little bit more what led that to that. Just if you want to give a little bit more. Yeah,
I would say.
Because when you talk about objectification of the body, it's obviously I think it's important. I've heard you talk about what the world communicates as valuable.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, messages from a young age, as so many of us get, just constant from media and, movies and whatever, of what is the ideal female body type. There is a feminine ideal for sure. I think now there's become a male ideal. You look at any Marvel movie and you kind of see that imagery, so to speak. And so I think, that was already conditioned in me long before.
And that you've talked about that before. What, you've talked about movements in French fashion in the whatever. I want you to talk about the creation of the kind of the worldview that we are all the oppressive state. Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of gets into the body positivity conversation to me anyway. The underlying foundational belief there, the philosophy is that certain body types are given either power or oppression, and they clearly fall into categories. I mean, certain, body types that carry power are, male bodies, white bodies, thin bodies, blonde bodies, athletic bodies, able-bodied.
So at some point in the human kind of Western psyche, what became good and beautiful is if you have a cookie cutters of these cookies, there's all these different great cookie cutter things. And then here's the one. This is the only cookie that is the appropriate one. Yeah. And part of objectification is, for you and for so many, trying to fit themselves into that mold.
Sure. We learn to evaluate our bodies based on that given standard, that ideal, that we're given by society. And so we're constantly evaluating, how do I measure up? How do I compare to this ideal? What else can I do? I mean, there's tons of stats around this, girls as young as 6 years old wanting to lose weight. I've got girls as young as 12 sitting in my office saying, when I get my first job, here's a list of all the plastic surgeries that I want to have done someday.
And again, so there's macro movements of what beauty is. Some of these things stem back into the, 16, 17, 1800s. Sure. And then, most households probably have and most people, parents, probably have, and I'm not saying your parents did or did not, but generally there's a pressure that this, if you're not thin,
sure,
you're not right.
Sure.
You're gaining weight. So I think it's important.
Well, yes. And a lot of times it comes from meaning well, right?
Right.
A lot of times I'll hear parents say something like, oh, she's gained some weight and I just don't want life to be hard for her, right?
See, I want you to talk to like what you would say to that parent that says, when their kid is going through puberty or they're, in a growth spurt or whatever, or they stop playing a sport or whatever. What do you say?
I mean, what we say is we acknowledge that, yes, there is a system in our world that teaches body ideals, that it is very true that larger bodied people in this world will have hard times simply because of their body, right? And that I will not face those same hard times in this body because I'm not in a larger body. Same reason I won't face certain pieces of oppression because I'm white.
Because of the system.
Yes. So we say...
You're not talking about their health.
Right. So we say, yes, there is a system of oppression, and the last thing your child needs is for you to encourage them to ascribe to a system of oppression and power. What they actually need is permission to be who they are in the body that they are, and they need to know above all else, this is going to get me emotional. I get fired up about this stuff. Yeah. Above all else, that they belong in your family system. Even if they can't find that in the world, they belong with you. And so if you as a parent are the one saying that,
and saying that is not just saying that. It's like, if you exhibit in your life, this is what's good, and passively it's, the kid that's heavy in you view your heavy daughter as, not okay, or she doesn't, whatever, like that's not okay.
Yeah.
You're communicating in all different ways. It's not just you need to lose weight. It's what do you, as humans, what do we really care about in terms of, do we see that larger bodied people, that's beautiful. That's awesome. And that's a different thing.
And that, in this world where there is that system of power and oppression, which side of the line are we on? And are we going to join the side of dismantling those systems and saying, nope, all bodies are good bodies, and let's create little by little a world where no one has privilege or different ways of living based on their body alone, right? Here's where this gets really cool is, I actually believe, and this is where like faith and eating disorder treatment stuff intersects, is I really believe that, if Christ was in a body, he put us in a body that reflects his image, and then collectively we're called the body, right? That being in a body is part of the way God designed his kingdom now.
Right.
And that those systems of oppression are very much a part of what we're supposed to dismantle, that being in a body, any kind of body, and being embracing and all loving to people is really a part of the Christian walk. So anyway,
a lot of people that you're helping are people who are larger bodied. Maybe they don't fit the ideal, and they have pressures from the system, whether it's their families or the world we live in, saying you're not okay.
Actually, no.
Okay, sorry. I'm missing something.
No, I help people on both sides of the equation. I help people who have been on the side of oppression for sure. But I'm
sorry. I'm just trying to confirm that part.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be right. I'm just saying you do that.
Yes, that is a part of it.
Right.
But here's, kind of to go back to like Martin Luther King said, no one's free unless we're all free. I get a lot of the girls that are already on the side of power. They're already in a body that brings them social power, but it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like pressure. That if I don't hurry up and keep up this, if I don't hurry up and keep being thin, if I don't hurry up and keep being beautiful, my life is going to come crashing down, because they see the oppression. They know that it's real. They know that it's true. And so I really work with both sides of the equation. And so it's not just helping the individual, but it's really looking at the entire system and trying to create liberation there.
So then the objectification of the body and the system, and then the objectification of you and how you only matter for X. So just from the Christian perspective and the messaging perspective, where does that all come from?
Oh gosh, I mean,
do you not want to go? We don't have to go there.
I mean, I think we should.
Right.
I think we use the word dogmatic in the last episode. I mean, so much of the teaching was very dogmatic, very absolute black and white thinking. Like, if you're not ready to sell everything you own and move to a third world country, then you have a problem with God. Or like, if you're, just a lukewarm believer, then that's not okay. I mean, so many messages, right? And then I got also what you did not get, the women's only chapels that were usually about being submissive or what a godly woman looked like and how we were supposed to behave. So just so much messaging about emptying yourself. I mean, I would imagine anyone hearing this could go, oh yeah, I've heard those messages.
Right.
Actually, I had somebody today.
But it's not just the mess. Sorry to interrupt. It's not just the messages. It's the culture. Like, they don't value the voice of women. They don't value you if you take care of self first. It's just the only thing that's celebrated is when you say things like, I don't matter. I'm no one. I'm just a sinner saved by grace. And basically the hierarchy is who's willing to be the missionary, who's willing to sell everything, who's willing to do all that.
Yeah.
So sorry, you were talking today?
No, just today alone. I mean, as one snapshot, I worked today and had someone that was the focus of the session, is teasing out things that she had heard through sermons in church and how dangerous it was for her.
Right.
It also is why I care so much about how you and John and Carmen or whoever is teaching in this church, like the whole thing about Genesis chapter 1.
Right.
It started and it was good.
Right.
Like, you have to start there.
Right.
Not, oh, you're a dirty, awful sinner and you're lucky God spent, time doing what he did.
No, you have to have balance. I think that's important. So I think that anyone that's listening, what she's getting at is like the idea that we need to sacrifice, the idea that we need to serve people. That's all real, but that's not because you don't matter. That becomes almost an inverted, like, works-oriented salvation. Well, I don't matter, so I better work really, really hard to serve others so that I can kind of be Christ-like in the world.
Yeah.
That's not the message of the Bible. The Bible is you are God's beloved child, and he pursues you and he loves you, and there's intrinsic value, and your child is wounded and hurt and messed up and gets caught up in all kinds of things, and the God comes along and tries to restore all that to put you back on track to what you were originally designed to do, minus all of the things. So when you're in an environment that basically never taught you are beautiful, you are very good, Genesis chapter 1, and you are very good. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Anyway, so that's what you're...
Well said.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. One of the other things is that you mentioned is that you experienced trauma, and I think we had a little bit of a discussion about trauma.
Yeah.
Or at least you said that it was like a trauma for you. Can you tell us about trauma? And then, like, we were having this discussion the other day, this plunger thing. So I want you to teach the trauma, like the trauma thing really as it relates to being trauma informed and what really helps people when they've experienced that.
Yeah.
So
great.
What is it?
Okay. So when it comes to trauma, it is really in the eye of the beholder. So the individual is really the one that gets to define it. However, we have some diagnostic criteria, symptoms that, suggest trauma. Really, it's an emotional response to something that happened. I say that now there's two types of trauma. One is acute trauma, which we more so think of like the big event, right? Acute trauma is like, oh, this happened. And it's clear and obvious and defined. And then we have complex trauma, which is more of a slow drip, like a dynamic over the course of time.
Maybe living with a toxic personality or
yes, exactly.
Parenting,
or like, a tricky dynamic in the family system, or addiction or chronic grief in the family system, like whatever, now they're saying social media obsession is a complex trauma for children who grow up in homes that, mom and dad are obsessed with social media. So there's all kinds of things on that list. They're defined as adverse childhood experiences when it's in the family growing up. But anyway, so part of what I shared in the first episode is my experience at Word of Life. A lot of it was the slow drip, like messaging consistently over a long period of time. But there were like some significant things that happened also that I would say is more of like the acute category. So a person can certainly have both. Here's what's so interesting about trauma is a lot of what we know about trauma actually comes from studying 9/11. And so a lot of it is really recent information. And it's in the field of neuroscience rather than therapy per se. And so studying the brain, studying the nervous system, studying reactions of what people experience when they go through hard things.
And that would be the classic example of, well, first and foremost, the capital acute trauma.
Yes, totally.
The towers fall down, all over that. Like I like to view it like PTSD. If a bomb goes off and you're over in Afghanistan, you have like a traumatic experience. Like you could be scared for the rest of your life, and then. But that's like that.
Yes.
9/11.
Yes.
So lots of case studies came out of that.
Yes, for sure. So here's the part you're alluding to. So a lot of people think that trauma is stored as like memory, like, here's what happened, right? And they tell the story. But really, trauma is not stored like that. You've heard the body keeps the score. So trauma is stored in our body, and then it's stored in certain parts of our brain. It is not stored. So memory, like logical thought, would be our neocortex, like our prefrontal cortex. This is like the rational part of our brain.
Okay.
So trauma is not stored there. Trauma is stored in either the brainstem. So like I show you my hand like this for people that are actually watching. So the brainstem, like the bottom back here, is one area. So that's like people who have the freeze or fawn response trauma response rather. That's the brainstem is where it's stored. Or people that are in fight or flight, it's stored in the limbic system.
Okay.
So this is also, we call it the reptilian brain. So think of like, I think of like a lizard in Florida, how it like scampers up the wall really quickly, right? Like that's us. We're like, our nervous system is on high alert all the time. Whereas freeze and fawn is either like frozen or like playing dead or completely shut down.
Right.
So what we have now are these really cool therapies that don't include just talk therapy.
Right.
Talk therapy would be engaging our neocortex only, and trauma is not stored there. So we can talk and talk and talk for years and years and years and never get anywhere.
Right.
And so we have these therapies now developed by neuroscience where we can access other parts of the brain, the brainstem, the limbic system, to kind of use it. This is the toilet plunger. Like we kind of can knock it loose, help it travel the neuro bridge, get to the neocortex. So then we can process it fully through talk therapy.
So let's get to the nitty gritty. What you're saying is that if someone just gets talked at, they can't just suddenly be healed from trauma.
Yeah.
So in the church, what does that look like? It looks like people saying, like what we'll say to people is if you're anxious, because a lot of times anxiety is a trauma response.
Sure.
So if I'm anxious, church, and I know we're going to go like the church route, but like I think the disparity between what you're saying is how it works and what we think is what causes healing. So someone goes through a traumatic experience, the church might think, well, they just need to know some scripture. They need to know the truth. So speak to that.
Yeah. So I will give you a really great example of this. I think it was in the last year, maybe 2 years, there were 3 prominent leaders in the Christian community that all 3 came out with books at the same time. And all 3 books were somewhat around the topic of like calming your anxious thoughts or managing your anxious thoughts and how to challenge your thoughts and dealing with thoughts and, filling your mind with truth and all of these things. So this is not bad, right? This is essentially in line with cognitive behavioral therapy. And yes, it is scriptural in the sense of, put off,
bad thoughts. Fill your mind with good thoughts.
Think about what is pure and right and beautiful and positive and, above reproach and all these things. But one of the leaders, they did like this simultaneous podcast about it. And he opened up and said, part of the reason I wrote this book is because I've been dealing with this negative self-belief for 17 years. And this is what I do to fight this negative self-belief. And I wanted to share it with everybody.
And what I do is I
and I,
read scripture, memorize scripture.
I meditate on the truth of the word, and I, fill my mind with the positive things, and so not bad things. Again, things that can help people.
Right.
But I heard that podcast, and I was just like, 17 years is a really long time to suffer with something. And if all you're doing is, to me, if someone has a negative self-belief that they've been experiencing for 17 years, I'm like, oh, that means you have some trauma.
That means you have trauma.
That belief got there because of trauma. And all he needs is somebody to go in and not engage his neocortex, not just talk or replace it with thought and truth. He needs someone to help him access those other parts of his brain so that he can knock those memories loose and actually open his neocortex to absorbing that full truth. It's amazing therapies that we can do, but that's where it gets disheartening. It's like, oh my gosh, you're going to struggle with that for 17 years. That's a really, really long time. Here's what's cool. I actually shared this with John McCambridge. I'm going to geek out a little bit. When you hear me talking about like these modalities or the toilet plunger, how we knock these things loose, the way that we do it is we combine these therapies with something called bilateral stimulation.
I was going to say,
So it's essentially, there's different ways, but it's like touching the body right to left, right to left. So bilateral meaning you cross the plane of the nose. So you can do bilateral stimulation to kind of knock the negative beliefs out of your, like, through your brain, but then you also use bilateral stimulation to install positive ones. So here's what's cool. This is for everybody in our church. On Sunday morning, when Eddie or whoever, Kevin, is leading worship, if it's a song where usually it's like a little slower. So for positive beliefs, it's a little bit of a slower rhythm. If you notice like our congregation swaying back and forth, like right to left, right? They sway right to left, right to left. That is bilateral stimulation. And so essentially what it is, and this is, I think, the coolest thing ever. I'm convinced, I didn't actually learn this from my trainer, but like I am convinced this is like the hand of God in our lives and our nervous system, that when we sway back and forth, right to left, and we're singing these songs about God's faithfulness, we're installing that truth, not just here in our neocortex, in our prefrontal lobe, we're actually installing it into our nervous system, and that's a part of our healing, right? It's pretty cool.
I mean, it's amazing. Like, I think just for a second, because when people hear that and maybe they're just hearing, it's like you're talking about with this bilateral stimulation that you take people on this journey of simply like literally like tapping one side or the other, and that activates something inside of you that starts to unlock these things.
Yeah.
And then you take people on a question and answer thing. And I just think it's important, like, for everyone to hear that, like, this is the idea of wisdom, and how if someone walks in and they have trauma, which basically, like, the quote that I have from one of our favorite kind of Christian authors around this and doctors, she says trauma is the unacknowledged guest at nearly every gathering of humans. So, like, people walk in the door, everybody has some kind of trauma. It's important to learn the truth about God. And it's important to understand what Paul means when he says, don't be anxious for anything. But he doesn't mean, hey, if you have trauma, think some different thoughts, and then it'll be healed. There's more healing that has to take place for people. Just like if your arm was broken, you wouldn't say, man, just think some positive thoughts and your arm will get healed. Now, God heals, and in the kingdom, all this stuff will be healed. And sometimes he does that, but predominantly, most of us Christians, if we fall and crack our head open, we go to the ER and we get it fixed. This is the science of emotion and trauma and lived experiences. And I think this is why you're so sensitive to it, because you went through trauma, and a toxic environment certainly didn't help. It caused trauma. But then a lot of churches could do well to be sensitive to the realities. And so you talk a little bit about staying in your lane. What does that mean for you?
Yeah. Can I go back to what you said before I get into that? So why I care so much about that is if you have somebody in your congregation, or a whole lot of somebodies in your congregation who have experienced trauma, and it's like, oh, well, you just need to think positive thoughts, and it'll heal. Or
people will say, like, you just need to know the truth.
Yeah,
know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
You need to fill your mind with truth, or you need to meditate on God's word, or whatever the you just statement is. Exactly. I mean, it's it's so similar to being like, oh, well, if you just have enough faith, then you'll get healed from cancer or something.
Right.
It's really abusive, manipulative way of promoting faith in my mind, that it's teaching someone, oh, if you're not healed, guess whose fault it is?
It's yours. Yeah.
And so I totally do not stand for those types of things. I also, one more thing until I get to the stay in your lane. I wanted to point out, so you mentioned like therapy is this wisdom that's available, right? The science that is available. So I wanted to share, Dr. Hill was not, so she was my, like the first therapist that I really connected with. She was not a Christian therapist. Yeah. She was exactly what I needed at the time. Yeah. As you can imagine, we say in the trauma world, you cannot heal from something that wounded you. You cannot heal from trauma in the same environment that created it.
Right.
And so I think for me, it was absolutely exactly what I needed to not be in a faith environment for a long time, actually.
Sure.
Therapeutically. I have had Christian counselors over the years, one in particular that was so helpful to me in really teasing out, similar to like the quote you just read, Dr. Allison Cook, like really teasing out, okay, if you were taught to die to yourself, what does that actually mean? What is Christ actually saying? And does it mean completely sacrifice yourself until you're completely void of a person and you're dehumanized and you're a self-object only? Like, no, it does not mean that. So she was really helpful. And then this other therapy that I mentioned, the trauma therapy in particular, it's called EMDR. People might have heard of that. So I have done that too. Thought it was really important to do it personally for some things before I got trained and certified to do it. So that's a part of it too. So anyway, that's that.
No, but I think people need to hear, like, if you're going through something and you have trauma and think of, just evaluate yourself. Large T trauma, 9/11, some cataclysmic event, some major relational thing, whatever that moment, that explosive moment that just is overwhelming, and you're like, that's trauma. A car wreck.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's figuratively and literally a car wreck. Yeah. That's big T trauma. But then also, like, if you kind of think about your parents' relationship with your parents, or a friend, or an abusive relationship, or something that just like for years went on and on and on and on and on, and you look back and you're like, I was kind of abused, or I was like, that what they taught me was unhealthy or wrong, whatever, you probably have some little version of that. So if you just go and say, well, I'm a Christian, so I want a Christian counselor, and then the Christian counselor's like, well, let's just learn the truth. Your problem is you don't know the truth.
Yeah.
The truth, when the idea of the truth setting you free, is about what Jesus can do. Well, what Jesus can do is that when you place your faith in him, he enlightens your eyes, and he gives all people all kinds of wisdom, like learning to help people heal through the science of this type of therapy. Not, suddenly you're just going to be healed of your trauma if you believe that Jesus is God. You believe that Jesus is God, and suddenly you're healed from your trauma. I mean, there's a whole commentary on suffering, and how sometimes when you believe in Jesus, it's like, no, my grace is sufficient for you. Like, you may not be able to get away from some of the challenges.
Yeah.
But my point is, I would just tell anyone that, kind of is in that world where it's just like, oh, just study the Bible, and you should be able to fix, and you should be able to forgive, and you should be able to hear. I have no tolerance for that. Like, I love the scriptures and what they mean, but they don't mean that.
Yeah.
And so I digress on that. I think that's a really important point. So we tell a lot of our people here, don't go to a Christian counseling center. Why? Not because we don't want them to learn the truth of the Bible. We want them to learn the truth of the way the human body and works and all that stuff. And of course, in the practice of therapy, there's all kinds of ideologies and secular thinking that, you don't agree, and not everybody agrees with everything that's out there. And, I don't agree with everything Freud said or Jung said, there's all different types of philosophies and approaches and stuff. And you really do have to know the truth of what your paradigm is and what you believe life is about. And then you can go into some spaces and get some real healing. But again, I digress. I think it's really important. You would go to if you were, and I'll end it with this. If you had a tumor in your brain, and you could go to the best surgeon in the world who was a non-Christian, or you go to a C+ surgeon who's just a faithful believer, you would go to the non-Christian. You would want the person that's the best at the job. So Christianity sometimes doesn't go and do what they're supposed to do, or they use the word for the wrong thing and therefore cause more maybe harm than good. So this leads to staying in your lane.
Yeah. Well, you were like all into this, and I'm like, I want to keep going on that one.
I know, it's a big one.
I think here's what I'll tell people is, therapists, we are licensed and we have an ethics code. So we cannot impose our faith on someone else. So that's one of the big things I hear from people a lot is like, oh, well, will another therapist, if they're a quote secular therapist, try to impose some other belief on me? I'm like, no, we can't do that. We have an ethics code to follow, right? So Dr. Hill never poked at my faith, never poked at what I believe. However, she did teach me other things, right? She taught me feminism and asked me, how does this relate to Jesus, right? She taught me womanism, which is another version. Essentially, it's the practice that the most oppressed voice is the one that gets the microphone first. And I'm like, oh, actually, that sounds a lot like Jesus, right? So she taught me these other ways of thinking. And that's part of what therapy is learning to think critically, understanding all different points of view, and really understanding what are my values, what are my convictions for me, not because someone else told me to think that. So whatever. No, I could go on about that. But
so stay in your lane.
Yes. So he's asking me this question because this is something I rant about at home a lot.
Yes.
I get really frustrated. I do think that churches mean well and are trying to bring more attention to mental health concerns and are trying to bring more attention that people are anxious and depressed, especially at this point in a pandemic. I also think sometimes, in the words of one of my colleagues, Dr. Mark Neubauer, that Christians sometimes know just enough to be dangerous. And so they'll prescribe things, or you'll hear things said from the pulpit about anxiety or about mental health things or about emotions and how to manage them and what to do. And I'll just be like, oh no, that's not what we teach in mental health, or that's not how we view it, or
that teaching that is damaging to what people are going through or how they're experiencing life.
100%. And so,
did we talk about in the last podcast? Did you talk about no emotions are wrong?
No, I don't think I did touch on that. That's a big one. I don't have a problem with churches sharing stories or promoting mental health or encouraging counseling, therapy, medications, any of that. I do think where I'm like, oh, you're going outside of the lines is when they start to talk about emotions. So really what I notice the most, this is what you're asking me about, is in mental health, we place no judgment on emotions. So emotions are not good or bad. They just are. Emotions are physical sensations of the body. So if you're like, what does that mean? So for example, anxiety, for me, the physical sensation of anxiety is that I'll get like butterflies, or even, the like ants swarming, like the static on TV, like I'll get that sensation in my belly, sometimes to the point of nauseous. I'll get really tense around my body. I will do some things like cheek biting or nail biting or something, like really tense with my hands, or my jaw holds a lot of tension. So anxiety is an example of emotion, right? Emotions are simply physical sensations in the body. They are not good. They are not bad. We place no judgment.
They're sending a signal. They're telling you something.
Exactly. And so we feel emotion. We're supposed to label the emotion. We're supposed to notice how it feels in our body. Some people give it a description like I just did. Some people give it a shape and a color. That's actually a really good tool for kids. Oh, what color is anxiety? Oh, it's gray scribbles like a Peanuts cartoon, right? Oh, I feel it in my belly, right? So we can notice emotion in our body, give it a label, describe the sensation, and then just observe it, have it as it moves on and passes on. Usually emotion has a really great message in relation to what kind of decision we need to make, what our value system is. That's the huge piece about it. Emotions are guideposts to our values.
Right.
So the example of, I don't know, nervous to go to school tomorrow. Or I'll use this. I am nervous to speak on a podcast, right? part of that about my value system is I've studied, I really care about this. This is my expertise, my baby, my area of passion. And so it's a lot to put it out there. I also feel vulnerable sharing my story. So yes, it's anxiety provoking, but it also tells me a lot about my values, right? So it's, that's generally.
So I think it's important to tell people what to do with emotion. And how, and then juxtapose it to kind of the way the church does. Like church kind of indirectly sends often like, you just need to be joyful, which again is just like, that's not even, I mean, the scriptures talk about how there's a season for everything. Sometimes weeping is the appropriate emotion. Jesus weeps at the tombs. I mean, it's just like it can't be wrong to be sad when something's bad. Like that's like your body, you're telling what if that's a great, if you cry when someone passes that you love, it shows you your value system. When you don't cry, when someone dies, it also shows your value system. So like, but you know, it's like, oh, Christians just rise above it, just be strong, just that. And I know that's not necessarily happening all the time. You know, but it still happens. So I think in the world we grew up in, and I think sometimes the idea is shake it off. Step up. You need to be strong. You need to like go ahead and
you just need to be grateful.
And
you just
think
need
about
to be
the
joyful.
positive. Just be grateful. Just be positive. So what? First of all, I don't think everyone's supposed to be grateful and joyful all the time. But what are we? We're not supposed to. Whatever our emotions say, we're not supposed to just like follow them and do whatever they say. We're supposed to listen to what they're telling us. And so give people like the process of emotion.
So assuming that no emotion is good or bad, notice the emotion, sit with the emotion, feel the emotion. When you're asking, what are we actually supposed to do? We're supposed to feel it. We're supposed to actually notice the physical sensation in our body. A lot of people are so numbed out with other things that they don't feel it at all. So we are supposed to feel our emotion. And then part of that is knowing what the message is, knowing what my value system is, and with all of that information,
make the informed decision.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, how do I want to proceed with both the wisdom of my emotion in my body and my value system, and what's the best course of action?
I think this is critical because even something like when you're in the purity movement, which is a little bit of a sideline, it's like if you have these romantic feelings, then you're told at a young, that's bad. Those are bad feelings. You can't feel that way. You can't think that way. You shouldn't be feeling those feelings. It's like, no, those are not bad. Those are normal. Well, how do you metabolize those? What are they telling you? What matters to you? What do you care about? And then
what's your value system?
And then what's my value system? So it's just teaching people to manage that stuff. And then I think it's important too, I think just in parenting, what this has helped us with is like, you know, when your kid is going through an emotion that, like for me, if they go through emotions that I'm like, oh, it's hard to watch them go through that. I actually see the value in letting them go through that. It's like, oh no, they need to go through that, and they need to learn how to manage that hard emotion. And I don't want to spend my life having them run from that emotion. I want them to figure out how to deal with that emotion in the appropriate way.
And letting them feel it. Again, that value system piece is so helpful. Developmentally, they need to know, oh, the fact that I feel this way tells me this about myself. Oh, that's actually really great about you. I'll give you an example. Jealousy. This is a very common one you will hear from the pulpit. Oh, jealousy is bad and it's the root of evil in your heart and it's going to grow into bitterness and it's going to destroy your life. Like you hear, again, read bad emotion. Again, I do not take that stance. I'm like, emotion is emotion. It's sensation in the body. Jealousy is the emotion that arises when essentially it's like if I have a connection with you and you have a connection with someone else, I'm jealous because you have a connection with someone else and that threatens my connection with you, right?
It's
so
a threat.
What's the value system there?
My connection.
I value relationship. I value connection. I value safe attachment with my husband. Duh. Right? And so jealousy goes, oh, maybe something's going on there. Maybe you and I are disconnected and we need to have a date night or we need it. So it just shares so much of like, what is the actual message? So we miss out on all that goodness when we just say it's bad.
Yeah. And then it's like, if Jesus is speaking to jealousy, he's talking about the condition of our hearts. But the reason these things are happening is because of these broken down connections, and maybe those motions are there to send a signal of what's really going on and help us because he doesn't want us to be jealous. So it's just, there's a lack, I think there's a lack of breadth and understanding what it is. When you look at a verse in the Bible, or you look at a context and you just apply it to everybody in the room, and you talk about being trauma informed and understanding the process of what people are going through. And like I've said, I think it's important, that as we continue to study scripture and do church, it's like, what is it actually getting at? That's objective. That's not like some kind of weaponized message towards whoever's in the room and to control them. So, okay. All this is really, really good. I think one of the last things we'll spend a little time on is a little bit more into your expertise on eating disorders. Because I don't know, this is one of those things that this is a hot button for a lot of people. Anorexia and body positivity and that manifestation in you of seeking agency, it leads to a whole lot of questions for people about how to have an appropriate relationship with food and how to have an appropriate relationship with their bodies and with other people's bodies. And so, give us your philosophy on food, on dieting. I mean, this is a hot one. This is like and you and I have these dialogues. And again, I just want to tell everybody, like Katie's an expert and this is what she deals with every single day. And I'm not an expert, and there's no judgment here of people are going through all kinds of stuff, but I want you to hear I want people to hear your expert opinion on diet culture, appropriate relationships with food, and so on.
Yeah, what a big question.
Yeah.
I will start by saying this. One of the things that I was thinking about episode 1, when I described anorexia as a restriction of agency, we saw that so prolifically through the pandemic, right? Where so many people lost complete agency. Their work shut down, their school shut down, their sport shut down, everything shut down. Yeah, the grocery store, their ability to get mail without Lysol or whatever. So yes, it's huge right now. This is such an issue. And you also heard me say in episode 1 that eating disorders are so scary because not only are they lethal, there's so many health problems that can ensue there, but also shoot, I lost my train of thought. That pop culture really affirms it, that we are surrounded, and that's what diet culture is. We are surrounded by this societal norms of lose weight and work out and burn the calories and eat healthy, and constant messaging about how to, quote, take care of ourselves, which really is really damaging. So diet culture is a system that essentially is upholding that body power and oppression that says, okay, this is the standard. This is what you need to get to. And it reveres thinness for sure. And it also is a narcissistic institution, and that it says, okay, if you try this and you fail, then it's your fault. And so there's a lot more to unpack. It's a huge concept, but part of my work is helping people understand what diet culture is, how it's been constantly giving messages. I mean, thousands of messages daily about thinness and what they're supposed to look like, and how it's at play, how it's at the grocery store. I mean, so many things. That said, I generally you'll hear anti-diet. You'll hear that as a buzzword. I do generally take an anti-diet approach. Another phrasing you'll hear is health at every size. So don't freak out. It doesn't mean healthy at every size. It means health at every size, that any size body can engage in health promoting behaviors and can pursue health.
Right.
So, I mean, you can have all shapes and sizes and have a varied level of health. So anti-diet means I do not prescribe the intentional pursuit of weight loss.
Right.
And so even that ruffles feathers.
But this isn't like, oh, this person's in dire straits, I don't prescribe this. This is like what you believe is the healthy track
Yes.
long-term philosophy to your relationship with food.
Yeah, and that's not just opinion. This is research. This is data. That the reason I feel so strongly about it, and actually this is really cool. So what we discovered is that when people go on intentional weight loss diets, 96% of people will regain everything that they lost plus 5%.
Yep.
And that's 5% more weight each time they re-up the diet. So essentially, when we prescribe a quote weight loss diet, it is, according to data, guaranteed to make them gain weight over the long haul.
And this is, you experience this, and this is all you see. I mean, when you're looking at someone maybe coming in because of the diet culture reality.
Yeah. And a lot of times it presents in my office like, oh, I was really successful. I lost all this weight. I felt amazing. And now I've gained it back and I don't know how to stop it. I'm out of control. I can't stop binging or, something like that. And it's like, hey, there is nothing wrong with you. I get that there's a diet culture at play, that narcissistic institution that has taught you that this is your fault. And yet your body responded exactly the way the data shows.
Right.
And so
and your body is telling you something.
Yes, exactly. That it otherwise believes that being on a diet is like being a starvation state, a famine. And so it's trying to save your life. That's basically what's happening there. So part of what I do then is help regulate the body after it's been through, here's a choice word for you, through the trauma of a diet, through the trauma of starvation, through the trauma of a famine. I help regulate and then resume normal eating patterns and then help kind
healthy eating patterns.
Yes. Normal, consistent behaviors in terms of what we consider healthy eating, appropriate eating for someone's body, and then go from there.
Sure.
So yeah, I take an anti-diet approach. Here's the other interesting thing. People are like, oh, well, yeah, I agree. I'm there. I don't like diets either. Like I won't do keto or I won't do this or that. And hear me, the way we define diet is any intentional pursuit of weight loss that you are guaranteed for that to backfire. And so a lot of people are like, what are you going to ask that? Like, what do we do instead? So
what would you tell people to do? I mean, you're giving away all your trade secrets.
Yeah. I mean, there's no substitute for therapy.
That's right.
Yes, especially if you have a skilled therapist.
Right.
So yeah, instead, if people are like, well, what do I do? My doctor tells me that I need to lose weight. Your best bet is to focus on health promoting behaviors. So get a good night's sleep. Keep yourself hydrated, spend time outside, go for walks, move your body in a way that's actually enjoyable. Get rid of your stress, at least decrease your stress levels, spend time in community, have good relationships, go to therapy. These are things that you can do that are health promoting behaviors outside of weight loss. The other piece to that is rather than eating according to some system or some, plan, we teach what's called intuitive eating. So the best way for people to understand this is just like the Holy Spirit is in your body and you know the voice, you know what it's saying, you know what it's likely to say, you get to know it, you know when it's speaking to you. Intuitive eating, that's kind of a weird jump, but it's kind of the same way.
Listen to your body.
Yeah, you have... The way that we are designed as humans is we have an internal system in our body, no different than, oh, my body tells me when I have to go to the bathroom and I listen. Oh, my body tells me when I'm hungry and I honor it. Yeah. And so some people are like, oh, well, I don't trust my body. That's where therapy comes in, is really building that trust back up. And, for me, like anorexia is being so disconnected from the body that if I told somebody, oh, just eat according to your body, they're like, I got nothing.
I don't feel
it at all. Or I feel hungry all the time and I'm so used to ignoring it that I don't even know how to honor it in an appropriate way. And so that's part of what we do with people too. So this is the part I was going to share. Intuitive eating. It was created by a dietitian and a medical doctor out in Irvine, California. But all the research was done at Ohio State Newark.
Nice.
By a woman named Tracy Tilka. And so, they took Buckeyes on campus there and did, a whole research project over the course of a long period of time to test out this intuitive eating and, really instead of eating for weight loss, eating as a self-care practice, and that it really helped normalize eating patterns and create a healthier weight set point for particularly college campus students.
So these things kind of work together, right? Like body image and the oppressive body image, or believing that a certain size is the only way. Even your body, it's like, I have to be 0 body fat. Like there has to be kind of an unlocking and an understanding of, look, God made my body, and it works, and generally speaking, it's a healthy, beautiful thing. And so I'm not going to try to become someone I'm not. And so then whatever size I am, if I'm a large body, I learn to genuinely go, this is okay. Like, this is beautiful. I'm done listening to what and that's a tough thing, because you have to be in an environment that reinforces that, and you have to learn those things, and you have to deal with whatever the trauma of that. But then once you're going to look at that and you go, well, maybe I'm overweight, what you're saying is the way to look at it is to just be like, build in holistic, healthy practices all the time, and don't go after I need to tighten up and lose all these pounds, because that's not a healthy pattern for the body. The body needs consistent, both communal, societal, stress, work, food, life, balance. And then, someone may go, well, then I'm not gonna, if I eat that way and just kind of listen to my body, what do you say to the person that's like, well, I just want to eat sugar all the time? Like, I'm just help with some of the elementary questions that go against this. Well, I want to eat sugar all the time.
My pushback to that would be that won't be true. Oftentimes,
which sugar's not bad. Here's an interesting example. So do you remember Catherine McPhee?
She was on American Idol, like one of the first seasons. Really strong, beautiful voice. She actually went to treatment between Hollywood Week and her time on American Idol. She went to treatment. Her dietitian was Evelyn Triboli, who established intuitive eating. So she had again, one of the best in the world. Wow. And so what happens is, when you are restrictive in your eating and you're like, oh, no sugar, what does it make you want to do? Yeah. You want to eat sugar all the time. Yeah. And so what happened...
This is important for people to hear.
Yeah. So what happened for her, she said she was super, super scared, because she's like, I got to be thin for being on camera. Like, I don't want to lose weight. And Evelyn said, okay, if you want to heal this sugar deprivation, you got to build in habituation. And she told her, every single day for a month, you have to eat
some Twizzlers,
a king size Snickers bar. It was Snickers bar. Right. And so every single night for 30 days, she had to eat this king size Snickers bar. Was she terrified? I'm sure. Was there a part of her that was like, oh my gosh, this tastes so good? Like, you ever get the lockjaw when you eat sugar and your teeth hurt like that, right? But then what happens after 30 days?
It's normalized. She doesn't want it all the time.
You don't want it all the time. It's the habituation. You've healed that deprivation.
And you're not demonizing it. It's just...
Exactly. It's just a candy bar.
So as you listen to your body, it's not some kind of trick. It's like, your body's going to crave healthy foods. Your body's going to, because you're going to get energy and strength from protein, and you're from good carbs, or I know I shouldn't say good carbs, but like you're going to get energy, and your body's going to function, and you're just going to have a totally different view of it and move forward in a healthy fashion, as opposed to, first of all, I have to look a certain way, and second of all, I'm going to deprive myself over and over and over again in order to do it. Yeah. Just kind of move into a normal state of becoming the best version of you. Tell the thing about how... Well, I don't know if you want to tell the thing about like the ice cream, like when you have the right disposition, that your body metabolizes it faster or something like that. I mean, which I hate to say, like, I also want you to talk about how like no foods are bad. Like,
well, yeah, just in the same way that no emotions are wrong or bad, we don't put judgment on it. We kind of take the same philosophy with foods, that we have unconditional permission to eat, that no foods are off limits, no foods are good or bad. We don't label it that way, right? That all foods have a genuine purpose for our lives,
like,
right?
There's a time to eat some ice cream, and there's a time to eat some steak, and there's a time to... And
for sure. I mean, think about our family alone, like how often we're like passing candy boxes around, but it also that healed deprivation. I mean, our kids don't have deprivation. We have like an open pantry policy at our house, but it's also why Jet and Kellen both have almost massive full bags of Halloween candy in the room still, and Easter baskets in the kitchen. They maybe like it the first day.
They like it a little bit.
Yeah. Right.
And it's funny, they crave salad. I mean,
Kellen
and
does,
I don't
yeah.
want to come off as self-righteous, like that we have that whole food thing figured out, but like, I hope that people hearing that is helpful for people, like to unlock something. I would say that's like kind of been a game changer for me.
Yeah, sure. And in the same way that we have hunger cues internally that we can listen to and honor, that our kids do too. Right. And so I'm not the expert of what they eat. I'm like, oh, are you done?
Right.
Are you full?
Right,
Is your belly
sure.
telling you that they have that within them, just like we
Learn
have
to
it
trust
within
themselves.
them. Yeah. The ice cream thing, we got past that.
Sorry.
People are going to want to know. So there's research. I mean, this is kind of more in the nutritionist side of things, which I'm a therapist, not a nutritionist, but I know a lot of the research. They say that if you go, let's say you go out to ice cream with a friend and you believe that ice cream is wrong and bad and you're cheating and you shouldn't be eating it, that because you're anxious and full of guilt and shame, that your body does not metabolize the ice cream as efficiently.
Right.
Versus if you go out and your disposition is, oh my gosh, this is great. Ice cream. I mean, I think of ice cream, I think of summer, and I think of our kids, and I think of graders, and I think of sports teams, and I think of like joy. And I mean, I love ice cream.
Yeah,
so,
celebrating.
Yeah. And
enjoying it.
Okay, if that's my disposition when I eat it, my body's going to be way more efficient in metabolizing that ice cream.
Which I like that example. It's cool because it shows like when you have an appropriate disposition towards food in general, your body responds to it in probably the way it should, as opposed to when you're anxious, it's responding the way it shouldn't. It's restricting and tightening.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't like that example too, because I really think the idea for me is no food is wrong. Listen to your body. Like, if you want to, what do you say like to someone who wants to put on a little bit of muscle and whatever? It's like you up your protein a little bit, listen to your body. Or if you're working out harder, you might need to fuel your body more. That's the basic idea, right?
I would say, really what we're trying to do is steer people away from the outcome. So instead of, I want to arrive at some aesthetic look, whether it's thinness or whether it's muscularity, instead of being chained to the outcome, really focus on the behaviors. Okay, if that's your goal, you're going to have to lift more. You're probably going to have to eat more.
Yeah.
Make sure you're
taking care of
fueling your
yourself.
body in the way that's necessary.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So, Katie, is there anything else from just anything, church, mental health, your story? This is all so great and so helpful. I mean, is there anything else you want to share?
The only thing we didn't talk about is anxiety in particular. And I think you had shared with me, you had a quote about it or something.
Yeah, I did. I had a quote that said, there's a lot of, it was a little bit in the church vein, anxiety is evil, that thing.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
So you kind of address that no emotion is wrong, but, anxiety is your body telling you something, I don't think, did we talk about the whole don't be afraid thing?
No, we didn't get into any of that.
So,
do you want to go there real quick?
Yeah, we can talk there about that for a second. I mean, I think the general idea there is that in church, a lot of times people think that when you have faith, that like you just shouldn't be afraid, and you just, fear means no faith.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like to me, and we touched on like the implications of this, of people walking into a situation and they are afraid.
Yeah.
And you're telling them, if you have faith, you won't be afraid.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that?
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I do not believe the two are mutually exclusive at all. And in fact, I don't even view fear or anxiety as problematic.
Right.
And here's what I mean by that. I think that, yes, in the church, you will often hear like, oh, that's of the devil, or that's the enemy lying to you, or anxiety is of Satan, or, those types of things. And again, back to what we talked about before, no emotion is good or bad. Emotion is just emotion. It's sensation of the body. The thing that's cool about anxiety, its job is to protect us.
Right.
And so I'm like, how can that be Satan? Like,
well, what is Satan is that Satan is the father of lies, and he's telling everybody anxiety is the problem.
Yeah.
And it's not, because anxiety is not a thought. Is it?
Yeah. I mean, anxiety is a sensation.
It's a sensation in your body.
State of the body.
So when your body is like afraid because there's a bear over there, if the devil is there going, you don't need to listen to that, you're probably going to get eaten by a bear.
Yes,
So,
exactly. So
yeah.
let's spend a few minutes here.
Yeah.
I think I've shared with you at home, especially because we have 3 kids, one of my favorite ways to talk about anxiety and fear is through the movie The Croods.
Right, yeah.
With the dad, Grug, I think his name is, where his whole mantra is never not be afraid.
Never not be afraid,
And you see this perfectly, this caveman family that they are just trying to survive.
Right.
And everyone else is dead.
Yeah,
right?
right.
They're
Yeah,
the
yeah.
only family
Right.
left.
Alive.
And so you see this great picture of fear and anxiety that this literally is there to protect them.
Right.
It is keeping them alive.
Right.
They don't do anything. I mean, I think like in leaving the cave, they're like forward, back.
Right, forward, yeah, right.
Forward,
yeah,
back,
yeah.
forward, whatever. So it's a great way to kind of show, no. It's not bad. It's there to protect us.
It's there to protect you.
Here's where it gets interesting. We have to get to know it. We have to know what it's saying. We have to kind of know intellectually what anxiety is. So I'll teach it really quick. There are 3 major types of anxiety. So the one you alluded to is real anxiety. So this is there is an actual literal threat, like a bear, or in the Croods, fire, or a tiger that is going to eat me, or a collapse of the rocks. Like there is a literal threat, and therefore anxiety is there to protect me and help me be safe.
Yeah.
The second one is perceived. So this is probably where that narrative of like, oh, Satan is the devil is coming up. So a good example of perceived anxiety may be, I'm anxious to, I was a dancer in a former life. So, I'm anxious to go on stage.
Yeah.
Well, it's scary. Everybody's looking at me. I'm under the lights, kind of
Right.
like this today. Am I safe? Of course I'm safe. Is it perceived threat? Perceived. That's
Right.
all it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
right? And so I can kind of go, oh, anxiety, thank you for trying to protect me.
Yeah.
I'm okay right now.
Right.
I'm not in any literal
Right.
threat. I'm not in any literal danger. Yes,
yep.
this is scary, but I'm good. And then the final one is what we call remembered.
Yeah.
So you had real, perceived, and then remembered.
Yeah.
So remembered is probably more along the lines of what we were talking about with trauma, that someone who's gone through something traumatic. So I think you mentioned a car wreck at some point.
Yeah, sure.
If you have been in a terrible car wreck and you get behind the wheel, are you going to be anxious?
Well, yeah.
Absolutely. Is
Right.
that anxiety of Satan? No, it's not. It's there to protect you. What is
Right.
anxiety saying? It's saying, hey, there was
Remember.
one time, remember, there was one
careful.
time when you got behind the wheel and things did not end well. Please be careful. Please be careful. And so again, it's, you remembered.
Right.
You remembered what I've been through. You've
Right.
remembered my pain.
Yep.
Thank you for telling me. I'm okay. I can do this. I've gotten behind the wheel again since the accident.
Yep.
I'm good, right? So it's just an interesting
And I think
way to think about it.
I think it's great. I think that's what people need to hear, is that these things should help enhance and sharpen our view of what our faith is and how it intermingles with emotion and trauma. And I think everybody, like we said, is going through something. So we have to hear these things different and be sensitive to what people are going through. I think that's really important. I think from a spiritual perspective, the truth, there's people like, wait a minute, if we really believe in Jesus, then will we not be afraid? It's like, well, so there's an overlapping of the ages, and this is what people need to understand. Like there's an overlapping. Okay, so we still are in this age of there's an enemy and there's darkness and there's really scary things, but we also have a resurrected King, and He's promised us, first of all, He's given us a spirit to help us, and then He's promised us a resurrection. But we're overlapping in the ages, and the end of the dark age is going to be the second coming of Christ. Until that time, there is a lot of painful stuff that we go through, and Paul even tells the churches in Corinth, weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn.
Yeah.
There is great sadness, and it's real. And so when somebody, I think to say like rejoice always, what you're trying to understand is, in the midst of all this pain, God has given us some answers to some of the big things that are going to come. And in the meantime, I think as we gain wisdom from the Spirit of God, we can metabolize emotion, we can metabolize our things, and not have them be this like evil weapon thing that get used against us, because they're not wrong. They're there to help us. And we shouldn't shame people when they're going through all kinds of different things. And I don't know. I just think it's great. Obviously you've helped me a ton in so many ways. We didn't even scratch the surface of how this has all helped me. And I don't know, Katie, thank you so much for sharing all this, for being brave enough to share all these thoughts and to bring your voice and use your voice and your expertise to share from your hurt and then bring your perspective to help the church. I hope as people listen to this, it's really helpful and it helps shape them. And even when I listen to it, I'm like, I gotta learn and grow and be more sensitive. And that's a journey that everybody's on. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, guys. So that's the rest for now. And we'll catch back up with you next time. Thank you so much for listening. We out.